Hi class, in this video we're going to make this picture switcher app to talk a little bit about inheritance and several other aspects of object-oriented programming, and also to get a little experience working with Windows Forms objects. So I have some images here on my picture switcher, and if I click them they'll randomly change. Notice I don't have fancy images here, just my different color items, so you can see them changing. Have a list button that just uses a message box to display information about each of the picture boxes that have been created as we've gone through our application. So this is what our end result should look like, something along those lines. And here are our class diagrams for the different class objects that we'll be creating. First of all, we'll have a form, and in our form we'll have our button, and we'll also have a class level field that we'll create of an array that contains these different picture boxes. And then we'll have a build method that is called by our form load process, and our button click. We'll see how that works out. And we'll have our constructors and then a click event to change that image when somebody clicks on one of the pictures. We're going to override the picture box class in C# to create our own picture box class called our picture box. And in our picture box, we're going to add some additional fields, some offset and size information, and we're going to add a label control to be associated with our picture box. We'll have public properties from our picture box class of the offset of this item, which will be from the left-hand part of the screen, the offset count, and a label that's associated with our picture box. We'll just have a method here called build settings and our constructors. Our last class will be a random image object. We'll use it to build a list of all of the images that have been loaded to the project's resources folder. We'll generate a random number to pick a random image from that list. All of these images can be found on GitHub, and I've got the link in a comment under this video, so you should be able to find that without any trouble and just download all of those images as a zip file. So I'm going to create a new project, and this is going to be a Windows Forms application. I'm going to call it the picture switcher. Now I am going to add this project to source control. Remember, you need to put all your stuff on TFS. And in TFS, I have it's going to display for me here. It's thinking. I have a CIS151 folder where I'll save this. Okay, so before I get started, let's do some proper renaming. It's going to be my main class, and I'm going to rename my form FRM display. Oops. Again, make sure that it does not eliminate the .cs. Say yes that you want to rename all the associated items. Close out of these. I'm going to do a save all here. Okay. Now, looking at my blank form, I think I'm going to set some default properties. First of all, I want my title to be something like picture switcher, and I'm going to set my back color. I'll go with burly wood. That looks good, doesn't it? And then our forecolor, something that'll show up good on my burly wood, maybe maroon. And I'm going to set my font to 12. Any other changes that you want to make. feel free. I'm just going to shorten my form a little bit so that you can see it on my screen. For this application, I need a little bit more width on my form than what I need depth, so that should work fine. Now, there are some things that I did in creating this application to get started. First of all, looking at my form, I can go to my Windows Forms controls and find a picture box and drag it out onto my form. And now I'm going to take the default information about this picture box to create a new class that we're going to use that will be our picture box class. So first of all, let's add that new class to our project. So we want to add it to our project. Can right click and add class. I want this class to be my picturebox.cs. Now my picture box is going to inherit from the system picture box class. And right away I get an error and it says, I don't know what you're talking about here. What is a picture box? Well, I could add the using clause that I need, or I could ask the system what it suggests, and it says, I bet you want to be using system.windows.forms, and that's true. So I'll add that to my using list. Some of these other things I could probably get rid of, huh? Let's try it. We'll just keep our system and system.windows.forms. Now that gave us a good inheritance, so we're going to be saying that this class builds a picture box. And we're going to be building it to our specifications, right? Not to somebody else's. Well, for our picture box, we need a few things that are a little bit just for us. First of all, I'm going to look back at our form. When I look at our form design and the picture box control that I set on the form as an example, I know that in my form designer code, I'm going to see the information about that picture box. So I'm going to look at that form designer code and I see some things about picture boxes. Let me show them to you. First of all, I'm going to want to set all of these default properties about a picture box. So I'm going to copy these items and put them in our picture box. Now we want to put those in our constructor. So let's go ahead and set up a default constructor, and we'll say that for this picture box, we're going to be updating some properties. Well, right away we've got some errors because our this control is going to be referring to our picture box. So we can actually get rid of this intermediate name. Our picture box control is going to be this object within this class. It is the object. So now we can update the properties of this object, our picture box object, without, having to worry about too many other things. We'll fix that, so don't worry about it too much, all right? Now, I'm going to go up to the beginning of our class, and we need to set up our class variables. Now, the reason that I wanted to show you these controls that are coming from the picture box is because I'm going to use these items, the location and the size, in setting up my class variables. So first of all, I want to set up a constant, and this constant is going to be an integer that's going to be the offset of my X position. And if I look at this picture box, it is 226, but I'm going to use the one that I had before. It was like 58. We'll just stick with it. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for our Y offset. And remember that XY coordinates indicate a point on the screen. So this point would be 58, 116 would give us where the top left corner of this image is going to be. I'm going to set up another constant. It's going to be our size. We're going to set our size of X equal to 270. And our size of Y equal to 90. Now again, those might not be exactly the same as the sizes that we have right here, but that is where I got them in the first place when I built the application that we're going to be modeling this off of. So I promise it'll work. Now the next thing that we need in our class variables is an integer that's going to be the offset of this picture. Is it the first one? Is it the second one? Is it a third one? And then we want an instance of a label. I'm going to call it the label. So this way we can update the labels text property and things like that with whatever we like from this picture box. Now, it's been complaining at me about this constructor, and that's because I put that return type in there, and of course we don't use that for a constructor. I was just so busy getting all of our stuff in here. So I do want to create some getters and setters, public property, for these two private fields. So I'm going to use quick actions on refactoring. And I want to encapsulate the fields, but still use the field. Now that should have generated some getters and setters for me, and sure enough it did. So I'm going to grab those and cut them and paste them up here right after our private class fields. So we've got our private class fields. And then we're going to have our public properties. All right. So I'm going to put an end region here after that. That gets us all started for our class. Now, when we look at our picture box class, we've decided that we're going to need to keep track of these size pieces of information and all this great stuff, because that's what we're going to use to generate our pictures. So let's do a real quick test here. I want to change this information to use our constants, offset X, offset Y, and then we'll do size X and size Y. That's a good start. Now I'd like to try instantiating this picture box object on our form so that we can work our way through this in a test mode. So let's go back to our form design, and I want to delete This picture object that we set up is a test, kind of as an example. And I want to create some code in the form load event of this form. So I'm going to double click on a blank part of my form to create that form load event. Now in our form load, what I would like to do is create an instance of our picture box, my picture box. And we're going to say this is a new instance of our my picture box control. Now we're going to put this control on the form. So we want to add to our form, which is this in this context, right? Because we're looking at our form load events, our current object is our form. Based on that, looking at the methods that are available, we want to add to the controls on this form. So let's add one, and what we want to add is our picture box control. Now, before we can see that picture box control, we're going to need to give it a picture. So let's go establish our pictures in our resources folder of our project. We can find our resources folder if we look at Solution Explorer and expand our references area. Our properties area. In our properties area, you should see your resources. And we can actually just double click on this resource designer. I lied. How about open? There we go. Let me do that again since it was kind of awkward. We went into our Solution Explorer and expanded our properties and then found our resources.resx. And when we click on that, we can choose a right click and open. Now that gives us kind of this resource explorer. And right now we're looking at our resources that are strengths. We don't have any, but we have this drop-down list of different types of items that we could have in our system resources container. We've added images to this container before using the picture box add image control. Right here we're able to do it using the resource designer. So I want to add a resource and I want to add an image. So let me find my images here. It looks like they're PNG type files. This isn't the way it did it to me before. Let me try this again. Images, add resource. Why are you being so mean? Let's see if we can just drag and drop. Oh yeah. So how was that? Are they in the right place? No. Just showing you how it's done, showing you how it's done. I want to move them into our resources. It's mad at me. Let's delete that. And can we add them straight here? That's better. Now it's not mad at me. So sorry for the awkwardness. Don't do that very often. But I went into the resource designer and then switched mode to images and just dragged and dropped these images that I want into this blank space that gave me my resources. Now I'm going to get rid of this one. It's not a good one. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which should be the same number that you have if you've downloaded those resources from GitHub. Now when we look at Solution Explorer, we should see our resources folder with all of those images contained within our resources. I'm going to close out of that Resource Explorer. Yes, I want to save my changes. Now, before I can do anything else then, I need to add an image to that picture box. So let's see, for our picture box, we have the image property because remember, since we're inheriting from the system picture box, we are inheriting all of those properties like image and all of those things that it's used to build. Now what I can do is access my resources by using the project's properties, resources. Then look, right there in the drop-down list are all of those pictures that we've added to that resource folder. I'm just going to pick one for our test here. Now what I'm hoping is when we run this, we should see our purple picture box show up on the screen. There it is. Now let's take a look at how we did that. In our form display load, our form load process, we said, I want to create a new instance of my picture box. Our my picture box class constructor was called. We constructed an instance of a picture box, right? Because we used the system one, and we set our location and size based on the size and location that we decided was a good fit for us. In our code then, we updated the image property of that picture box to be one of the images we pulled into our resources folder, and then we added that picture box control to our forms controls list. So I could change this keyword to our form name at this point if I wanted to, because that's what our current object is. So now we get an instance of our picture box displaying on the screen. So we've dynamically created that picture box. Now in our picture box class, that's all well and good, but what if we want to decide, we want to be able to put several pictures on the form. We need to use an offset. We need something to use as a multiplier to move the pictures across the form so that they're not all in the same place, right? We don't want them to all end up right together in the same place. That's no fun. So let's see how we could change that a little bit. I think that in our My Picture Box class, what we could do is we could change the location here a little bit to use a formula. So before I do that, I need to have an offset passed to us in our instantiation of our picture box control. So let's create another constructor and do a few other things. In this My Picture Box control, we're going to be passed an offset number when our form is called. I'm going to need to do all of this same items here as I did in the default constructor, so I think I better make that stuff into a method. So first, I'll set this offset equal to the offset that was passed to me in my constructor, and then I'll call a new method, build settings. This is going to build our picture box. Let's create that method. Now this is going to be a method and it's not going to return anything, so I will make it a void. What we want to do here are all of these things. Perfect. And for our default constructor then, let's say that we're going to make our offset equal to 1. We'll assume it's the first one if they didn't supply an offset. And we'll run our build settings method. So now if we have a default constructor, no parameters, we'll set our offset to 1 and build this picture box. If we do get an offset passed to us, we'll use it and then we'll still call our build settings. So for this now, instead of just using the offset of the X position, which was the X position, right? We want to make this more into a formula. So I'm thinking that the offset is kind of like how far over it was from the edge of the screen. So I need to add to that. And what I want to add to that is the size. You know, how wide is our picture? Okay, so however wide our picture is, I could add that. Now that would give me 2 pictures, right? The second picture would be smushed right up against the first, but I would have them side by side. So to make it a more visually appealing display, I'm going to multiply the size times our offset, but I'm going to subtract 1 from our offset because that way, if we're looking at our first image, we won't be adding anything extra to it, right? We'll multiply by 0, and so that way we'll come out correct, and that's perfect. I think I'll make the name of this picture box be picture box plus our offset so that it is a unique name on our form. We don't want them to be the same. All right, so now we've updated our My Picture Box class to allow for an offset to be passed. And in that, we're going to try to situate our beginning point of our picture so that we can see more than one. So let's update our form code to use this. Let's create another picture box here. And this time we'll pass in 2, right? So our first time we could pass in 1, or we can just leave it empty because we set up our default is 1. So let's create our second picture box here. It's offset 2. And then for this picture box, we want to update its image. We'll set it from our resources, and we'll make this one a different one. Let's make it green. And then let's add it to our form controls. Oops. Okay, now we should have 2 picture boxes show up. Oh, voila. Nice. Our purple one and our green one. So that looks great. We got everything working there. As I create these pictures, I think that it's going to be better for me to not keep creating more and more code here. I need to put this display load into some sort of loop so that I don't have to worry about these things. So I'm going to do that. Let's create a list of these picture boxes. So the list control, hang on, sorry. The list control is just like an array, if you remember, and it just lets us have multiple items. We don't have to worry about it growing or shrinking or anything like that. Now, what I'd like to do is create this list. And the list uses a generic, and it means that whatever data type the objects are that are going to be held in this list should be supplied within these greater than, less than brackets. Well, the data type I want to use is my picture box. I want to create a list of those things. And I want to name it picked array. And I want to set it up as a new list item of my picture box items. And then because this is a constructor, I do need my open and close parentheses at the end. So it can look a little funny when you're working with a generic. But remember that generic gives us that capability of overriding that data type, okay? So as we look at our list here now, we're saying we want a list or a whole array of picture boxes. We don't really care how many. In this example, we're going to control it ourselves in the code, but we could make it dynamic, so I wanted to use this control to show you. So as I said, let's control it in our code. We'll control it with a for loop using an integer named I. We'll run while I is less than 4 because I only want 4 picture boxes across my screen. And then for each time we execute this loop, we're going to add a picture box. So let's cut this, paste it inside our for loop. I'm going to delete this one because I don't need it at all. So our for loop is set up to run 4 times. That's how many pictures I would like to generate on the screen. Each time we generate a picture box, we're going to use our myPictureBox class to generate a new instance. We're going to add it to an image to it, and then we're going to add it to our list of controls on the form. Now at this point we're going to end up with 4 purple boxes, right? So the only other thing that we need to change is what is the offset of each of these items. Well, I can use I, but in our code we said our first offset should be 1. So we better add 1 to I because our first value of I is going to be 0. Now let's see if we get our 4 picture boxes. Beautiful, voila. Okay, it's looking really good. So we've taken a control, the code that was generated by Windows for this picture box, and we've said, well, we're going to use this code ourselves so that we can generate our own picture box controls, and we're going to add to those picture box controls using inheritance so that we can use some polymorphism there to morph it into a different type of picture box, a picture box that now has some additional information. We need to add some additional capability to our program. Right now, all we're displaying is that one picture box, just the same one all the time. So it would be nice if we had some sort of randomizing going on. So let's create a new class for that. I'm going to add a class, again, to our project. And this class is going to be our random image class. So I'm going to name it randomimage.cs. Now in our random image class, we want to read through all of these resources that are available in our project and then pick one randomly to be the item that's used, right? The one that's passed back. So this random image is going to be a static class. Let's set some things up for it. First of all, said we're going to generate a random number, so we need to use a random class instance. I'm going to make this private, static, and we'll call it randomGen. And that'll be a new random number generator. Okay. Oops, I got it in the wrong place. Let's fix that. You don't ever do that, do you? Need it within my class. Let's get some of this other stuff shrunk down a little bit out of our way. So inside our class, we can declare that variable. Now, besides our random number generator as a class level variable, we need a list of images, a place to keep all of these images. Now, whenever we're using an image, we're getting the image from the system drawing library. So we're going to say we want to create an array of images. We're going to call it image list. Again, it's an array of system.drawing.image components. And I give you 8 images, so we're going to make it 8 as our size. That's going to allocate that array of image objects empty for us to use. Now, if I look at our using clauses, let's see if we could use system.drawing. And then can we get rid of that prefix? So remember, you can fully qualify item names like this using the namespace class name and the component, or you can shortcut with your using clauses. Now, when we are looking at this random image, we're going to have just one method. This method is going to return an image to its caller, and we're going to call it getRandomImage to match up with our class name. So it's sort of a little bit like a getter, but we're making it ourselves. Now, to process the properties resources folder, I did some searching online, so this isn't something that I just picked out of my head. This is the areas where we have to go using the Google, right, to figure things out. First of all, I'm going to set up an integer to use as an index into this list that we're going to create. And we're going to create a list of resources, a resource set. And this is going to be the class type that we want to use to hold this set of resources. I can show potential fixes. I'll enter, and it says, would you like this using clause added? Sure, yes, thank you so much. Now I should see system.resources up there, and my resource set error has turned blue, so I know it's acknowledged that class does exist. I'm going to call this resource set, and it's going to come from our properties of our project. Our properties resources. We're going to use the resource manager to get all of the resources. Again, some of this we're just going to pass in the current culture, true, true. Those are just required parameters. Now, just like when we're using REPL to set our culture, we have to use that system.globalization namespace, so that gets us all set up. Now, I've got here a command that should build this set of all of the resources that are in our properties folder. So now we need to navigate through this set and do something with each of them. So for each of those things are considered dictionary entries. So for each dictionary entry, we'll call it an entry in our resource set. And again, we probably need to add a using clause, system.collections. So for each of those entries, we can add to our image list. But I wasn't really sure which was which. So let's think about how we could do some debugging here. I went back to the good old console.writeLine and thought, what in the world is this entry? Let's see what kind of information we get if we just write it out. And then looking at the web resources that I found, I saw that sometimes they used entry.key and sometimes they used entry.value. So I wasn't sure of which. So we'll just let our code help us learn by walking through each of those entries and giving us some information back. Now I need to put a return value in to get away from my error. So what I'll be returning is an image list item. And we'll just put in a number 1 right now, just as hard-coded to see how things are working. So I'm going to call this method that I haven't fully implemented yet so that I can see what these different values are that are coming back out of this properties folder from my project. So getRandomImage is my method name in my random image class. Let's look at our form. And for every time that we want a picture box image, let's call that we want to use our random image, getRandomImage method. Remember, since this is a static method, I don't need to create an instance of a random image. I can just call it directly. Let's see how angry things get. Now I see that I have nothing here. That's all right, because what I want to look at is my output and see what kind of information I got from those console.writelines. If I scroll up to the top of my output, apologize, you're going to have to look at yours a little bit bigger, but I see that I've got system.collections.dictionary entry, then a name of one of my pictures, and then system.drawing.bitmap. So for each of those different, there it is, console.writelines, the entry itself is named dictionary entry, which makes sense because that's the class name, right? That's what kind of object we're looking at. The key associated with that entry is the name of my image, and the value is the type of data that that image contains. So yay, I'm going to stop running. That gives me enough information that I know that it is this key that I need to add to my array of images. So I can eliminate this debugging information. Now it's complaining, it's saying that this dictionary entry can't just implicitly convert this. Oh, but I know it's an image. So I'll go ahead and put in a cast to convert that to that image data type. And then I need to add to I. Now when I'm done with my for each loop, I don't have a value of I anymore, but I can get one. I'll say that I want I to be randomly generated, and I want it to be the next integer between 0 and however many items there are in my image list. Then I can return that image list item I. So what did we do? We looked at the properties. resources information in our project, read through all of these items and put them in a resource list, navigated through that resource list to build an array of images, and then used a random number to just pluck one of those images out of that list. And that's the image that will be used by our caller. That's what's going to be returned. So in our form, we should be able to just run this now and see what we get. Oop, my bad. We wanted the value, not the key. Let's make sure. Oh, yay, so easy to make a mistake, huh? So voila, now we have our 4 images showing up. They're randomly selected, even though we ended up with one of the same ones a couple of times. Everything looks great. I'm really excited by it. Now, when I look at my form display, I see that I'm generating and getting my random image within my form creation. That's fine. You know, I can do it any place that I like. That'll work out. So just be aware of where we're doing things and how we've got things set up. Now I'd like to, in our picturebox class, go ahead and update the associated label. If you remember, we said that each of our picturebox control objects was going to have a label control associated with them called the label. So let's update that. I want to set the label's location, and this is going to be a new point. Again, with an X and Y axis. Oops. What is the X and Y axis going to be? Well, I want them to be whatever our location is for our picture box. So I want them to have the same X location, right? The same left border, but I want their Y location to be a little different. So I'll take the Y location of our picture box plus its size, and then I'll just add a little bit for an offset number there to that position. That should give me a good location for the top left corner of my label. I'm going to set my label size and again, it's going to be a new point. With an X and Y axis. And I think I'm going to set my size the same, and then I'll just give it like 20 tall. Oops, not point, that size. Now we're using all of these system drawing objects, if you notice, allowing us to get to exact locations on our form. I'm going to set the labels tab index equal to 0. All of these things that we need to make sure are set properly. And finally, the text property of the label. I want this to say something meaningful, like label number. And then I think I'll add our offset, because our offset, as you remember, is like, which label are we? Now we're just populating these label fields when we build our picture box control, our own overridden picture box. So let's update our form then to add that label to our form. So it's in our picture box, and it is the label. So now we should see our 4 picture boxes and their associated labels. Perfect. Again, we got a lot of duplication with our random numbers. I like to add in our click event for this because we're just about done here, right? So let's think about this. If I go back to our form and I add a picture box control, and then I double click it, I get my event procedure. That looks good. picturebox_1 click. That's fine. But what happens in my system generated code so that I can emulate that in my picture box control? Now look at that designer code. And we know what happens, right? We get that line of code that associates that method with our control. Here it is. So I'm going to copy that line of code. This picturebox1.click plus equal. Is that our delegate? I'm going to copy that. Now I'm going to go back to my form and delete that picture box control because I don't want it sitting there messing my stuff up because I'm going to put all this in my code. And in our form load, when we're building our controls, we can associate that. So let's put that right after we get our image, our event handler delegation. Now, when we're looking at this item, we're looking at pickbox. So we're going to say for pickbox, I want to add a click. And for this pickbox, my click event is going to be picturebox1_click. Well, I don't like that one. I'll just make it picturebox_click in both places. And we should be all set. Now to make sure that's working, I'm just going to put a message box dot show for troubleshooting because we want this to work for all of our pictures. So let's run it. Now I've got my 4 different pictures. Their associated labels are showing up. If I click on one, it knows it was clicked. All right. So how do I know which picture box was clicked? In our click event, the information that we're being passed to us by the system is the sender parameter and the event args. And we know our event args are normally things like what key was clicked and things like that. So it's probably our sender. Let's see if we can figure it out. So let's see what our sender object says if we run this. The picture switcher, my picture box. Okay, so it knows that it's a my picture box object. Remember, that's our class name. So the system is aware that that's what this item is. Great. So we should be in pretty good shape there. How can we just say we want to grab that picture box? Well, let's create a my picture box object. And we'll say that it's our sender. Now again, the system's not going to let us do it because it doesn't realize that the sender object is a my picture box object, but we know it is, so we can cast it. and say, sender, you're in my picture box, and I want to call you new box. Now we can use our new box image property to update that image. All we have to do is call our random image class, get random image function or method. That'll give us a new image. Now the thing is, we have this picture array set up that was all of those images, and I'd like to update that. Right now, let's see, it's called picturebox. And if I try to access that in this method, I can't, because picturebox was declared in our form load. So let's move that declaration. I'll copy this beginning part up to our class level fields. Then in our form load, we'll eliminate that data type so that we don't create a new instance of the picturebox, and we'll use that instance of the picturebox that was declared as a global class level field, make it a new instance of a list of picture boxes. Look at us go. Okay, so now we've got that picture array and we want to update it. Which one do we want to update? Well, we can tell by looking at this new picture box instance. It's going to be its offset. But whatever its offset was, we want to subtract 1 from it, right? Because we started out with that offset of 1, not 0. So we've got to get it back to 0 if it's the first one. And it is going to be equal to our new picture box that we've just created. So easy peasy, we just said, well, whatever that sender is a picture box, make it 1, update the image in that picture box, and then set up our picture array so that it knows about this picture box's image so that it is always up to date. Now at this point, we're not using that picture array for anything. We're going to here in a minute just to show you. The whole idea here is just to give you an understanding of the fact that we can do that if we want to. All right, so we've implemented our code here for our picture box click. Let's see if everything's working. Oops. Index was out of range. Let me stop. Do not have that problem in my testing. I always left that, huh? Let's run it again. Click it. Now, what I want to look at is my locals screen down here. What is my new box value? Offset. Let's scroll down to our O's here. Oh, it says it's 2, so that should be okay. Well, I'm just going to stop there, comment that out, run it and see if it's working without that. We're still going to crash. It's working. There it goes. Delayed reaction, huh? So the part that is a problem is where I was updating the original array of our picture boxes to get us set so that we have the right image in that list. That's okay. Leave that to you, huh? Now, the last thing I want to do is add our button. And I want this button to display everything that's in our list. So we're going to use a for each. iterator because we have this picked array. Each of the items in there are my picture box objects. Hopefully this will help us solve that earlier problem. Now for each of those in our array, I want to output a message box. And I'm going to just say, here's some info. I want the pics name plus a space. Plus I want the pics image. I'll do a 2-string on that to try to make it readable. And then I want an additional parameter. I want my message box heading to just say stuff. And then I want some message box buttons, but just the OK. So now my message box should display out the information for each of those pictures in our picked array. My picked array is not working properly. We noticed that already, huh? So we have it up here, allocated as a list of picture boxes. It's picked array. Then in our form load, we say that we want to create this as a new list of picture boxes. And then we never add anything to it, do we? Well, silly us. So we add our controls to our form. We also need to add them to our picked array. Now, that should help a lot, right? Because now we're going to have those items in our array. So in our update, our picture box click, I can update that array properly. And in our button click, we should be able to output that information. Let's run it. Sometimes we can have stuff so well and just not quite implemented, huh? Click my orange. It changes. Come on. There, it goes to a different color. Sometimes you're not sure, huh? We don't have too many different options, so our random is not quite as random as we would like. Now let's try our button. Picture box 11, 12, 13, 14. Looks like our picture box name is a little bit wackety, so let's check it. And on my picture boxes, there it is. Get rid of that one, and then everything should be working great. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we've done a lot with this program. I hope that it helps you with your game. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.